The story begins with our hero being pierced by a skeleton spear. He falls to the ground powerless. As the creature watches him, his name is Shinobu Ajima, and he is 18 years old. The skeleton stands there, just looking at the fallen boy. In that moment, the young man completely panics, not knowing what to do. Then, the creature raises its weapon to deliver the final blow. The boy looks back, terrified of the oncoming attack. With that, the spear strikes his leg, injuring him badly. He screams in pain as he feels the blade pierce his body. But the enemy doesn't stop and attacks once more with its weapon. The boy realizes that if this continues, things will end badly for him again. So, he uses all his strength to block the monster's attack. Shinobu refuses to accept this fate and continues to resist. He yells that he'll do this as many times as it takes, because he needs to do all of this to save Megumi. Suddenly, the skeleton's hand grabs the protagonist's face, and with brutality, it slams the young man's head on the ground. The boy is completely stunned by the violent impact. The creature then aims the spear right at his eye to finish things, and without mercy, the monster delivers a final blow. But the story goes back a few hours before all of this happened. A welcome message to the world of La Vida Online appears. The boy is confused and wonders if he's inside a game. La Vida Online is a mobile MMORPG with an open world. Thinking about this, he decides to check his status to be sure. With a gesture, a status screen appears in front of him, confirming his suspicions. He really is in a game. This leaves the young man quite surprised by the current situation. He analyzes his stats and sees he's at level 1. But he remembers he had reached level 99. He remembers working really hard to level up, laughing like a maniac. But now, he doesn't understand anything that's happening. A system message informs him that his name is not set. Then he wonders if he's going to pass away and thinks it's a joke. Also, any defeat in the game results in data loss. He realizes that if he's defeated here, it will be his definitive end. The game informs him that the tutorial begins by heading north. With that in mind, the young man starts walking through the forest. Even though it's just the tutorial, he's already on the brink of defeat. The boy seriously thinks that if he's defeated, it's all over. Suddenly, he senses a strange presence approaching. It's the same skeleton from before, and it looks ready to attack. The boy gets desperate because he knows he's going to be taken down. In a quick move, he kicks the spear to defend himself, but the creature holds its weapon firmly, unfazed. So, he angrily tries to punch the monster directly. The skeleton retaliates with a strike from its bony hand. To the young man's surprise, the monster's arm breaks. He's shocked by how fragile the creature seems to be. The boy wonders if he hit a weak spot on the joint. An info screen appears, revealing the undead knight. He notices the recommended level shouldn't be in the tutorial. A penalty has been activated because he disobeyed orders. He remembers that La Vida is an action game where skill matters, but he's used to playing on his phone, not with his body. The wound on his stomach is still hurting a lot. Even so, he prepares to fight with determination. The young man understands that if he doesn't act, things will end badly again. With a powerful kick, he runs, knowing he'll be defeated if he doesn't act. He looks at his stats and thinks about using a magic spell he has. If the world is really like the game, he needs to try something. So he extends his hand toward the monster and concentrates. With that, the boy uses his level 1 fire magic and casts a powerful fireball at the undead knight. The attack hits the creature head-on, which is engulfed in flames. This creates an opening, and the young man grabs a sword from the ground. He charges forward with everything. He's got to seize the opportunity to attack, and manages to drive the blade into the skeleton's chest with force. But the monster rips off its own arm and throws it at him. The boy is hit head-on and thrown far away. He decides he'll fight with everything he has, just like in the game. So he throws himself at the enemy, knocking them both to the ground. The protagonist sees a glowing core in the skeleton's chest. With the sword in hand, he readies himself for the final blow, and he shoves the blade with all his might into the monster's core. The boy yells that there's no way he's losing this fight. The creature struggles, trying to resist the final attack, but he keeps pressing the sword against the undead creature. After a long fight, the enemy is finally defeated. The young man falls to the ground, exhausted, and celebrates his victory. He understands that with tactics, it's possible to win even at level 1. Completely exhausted, he closes his eyes to rest. Suddenly, the boy's body starts to be lifted off the ground. He gets scared when he realizes he's being pulled toward the sky. A giant skeletal bird appears and captures him in mid-air. The huge bird holds him tightly in its beak, flying high. He despairs because the penalty comes with both monsters. It's been so long he doesn't even remember the tutorial anymore. The bird's eyes glow menacingly at him. If this continues, the boy knows it will be his end again. As it's his last chance, he decides to use his fire magic. The boy shoots a fireball right in the bird's face. With the impact of the explosion, the young man is thrown far away. He's surprised because the attack was stronger than expected. Now the protagonist is in freefall toward the forest. He hits several tree branches that rip his clothes. Even with the violent fall, he somehow manages to survive, but he spits up blood and realizes he's badly injured. A branch has pierced his body, and he doesn't know how he's still alive. His vision blurs, and he can barely feel his own body. The status screen starts bugging out, showing various numbers. His health points drop to just 1, and he's about to be defeated. The boy knows that any movement could be his last. To make matters worse, the skeletal bird appears in front of him again. The monster opens its giant beak to devour the boy. Desperate, he screams for the creature to stop. Suddenly, a bright light shines, and everything turns white. A childhood memory appears with an outstretched hand. He remembers his happy family with his father, mother, and sister. The young man thinks he's getting a glimpse of his life, and again, he sees the image of his smiling family with sadness. He remembers his mother in his thoughts. He recalls the day his mother was sick in the hospital. On that difficult day, he had to comfort his sister, Megumi. Shinobu accepts his end and says he'll be with his family soon. But then he sees a light, and Megumi's image appears. His sister smiles at him in a very friendly way. The boy then wishes that Megumi could live happily ever after. Suddenly, a strange dark energy attacks the girl. He yells angrily for them to let Megumi go immediately. The girl begs for help as a shadowy figure holds her. Her brother advances furiously, wanting to know what's happening. He pleads for the creature to stop hurting his sister. Shinobu screams with all his might, asking who that being is. A sinister man appears smiling, and the boy yells at him with hatred. Suddenly, a bright light appears and startles the protagonist. The game screen then displays the message that he is defeated. Again, the same message appears, confirming his defeat. But the boy wakes up lying on the grass, confused by the situation. He realizes he didn't perish and wonders if he's still alive. The voice from the beginning welcomes him to the world of La Vida Online. Then he remembers that since it's the tutorial, there's no penalty. Even if he's defeated by the skeleton knight, nothing happens. And even if the giant bird defeats him, he just starts over. This means he'll have to go through it all again. But with determination, he clenches his fist and decides to continue. He blames a certain someone for resetting his level in the game. The scene changes to an apartment in the city at night. His sister Megumi appears and asks if she can come in for a bit. He says yes, since he's already been accepted into college with a scholarship. She congratulates him, and he celebrates being able to play La Vida again. The girl jokes that he really loves that game. He notices she seems different and asks if she needs anything. With a sad expression, she tells him that Mocha disappeared yesterday. The young man is confused and remembers the family cat. The two of them stand in the room in a somewhat awkward atmosphere. An older man appears and asks to speak with Shinobu. He says goodbye to his sister and says they'll talk about it later. The man talks about the scholarship and how he'll be moving out soon. The boy just listens in silence to what the older man says. He says he took them in out of friendship for their father, who only left debts. Shinobu thanks him, and the man reveals he received his father's life insurance. It was 50 million yen, and he simply kept it all for himself. The older man says he doesn't need the money since he's already rich. The protagonist remains silent, not understanding the situation. Then he states he won't give the boy a single cent. The young man questions this, as he thought the money was supporting them. He says he even worked to help cover expenses. Coldly, the man says that all of this is nothing but revenge, and reveals that Shinobu's mother was his first and only love. He tried everything to win her over since childhood because he thought the power of money would make her fall in love. Angrily, he shouts that in the end, she married the boy's father. He was obsessed with her for 14 years, and the father appeared out of nowhere. The man accuses the boy's father of kidnapping her from him. Slamming his fist on the table, he shatters a glass in a fit of rage and continues saying that Shoko passed away 12 years after getting married. He blames the young man's father for her passing because they lived in poverty. The protagonist realizes the revenge plan has been going on for 4 years. Shinobu asks if the revenge is against his deceased father, but with an evil smile, the man says it's against both of them. He repeats that the revenge also applies to the siblings. The boy is confused and asks what he means by that. The older man then questions if he believes in an accidental passing and asks why he thinks his father's company went bankrupt. He simply used his influence at the bank to pressure him. With that, his father's clients began to disappear one by one. He also made the bank increase the loan interest rates. Without money, the father had to take out loans from loan sharks. The man reveals that the father was driven to take his own life. The boy denies it, saying his father fell at a construction site, but the man just laughs in his face. He reveals that the young man's father begged for his passing to look like an accident. The older man continues, saying that before he passed, he pleaded for something, with tears in his eyes. The father asked him to use the insurance money to care for his children. He laughed hard, not expecting the man to go that far for the insurance money, and Shinobu attacks him. The man just comments with contempt on the anger and desperation in the boy's eyes, and with a smile on his face. He says the young man is just like his father. That's why he kept him around, to keep seeing the boy's father's face. He enjoyed seeing the same desperation in the boy that he saw on his late father's face. The older man then says that the young man's father stole his beloved Shoko from him, and with hatred in his eyes, he yells that this is his revenge against the boy's father. The protagonist stands there, just grinding his teeth in rage. Then, with a malicious look, the man says it's now time for the next part. Shinobu realizes he's talking about Megumi and completely panics. He comments that Megumi looks a lot like a young and vibrant Shoko. The man says she turned 16 and that it's time for him to try something. The young man lunges at him, but the older man says it was just a thought. He says that, strangely, the girl doesn't like him, so he gave up, and he also won't risk getting arrested, so the boy calls him a fool. The man complains in a sick way that laws against that sort of thing exist. The boy is disgusted, thinking how someone like that can exist so close to him. Suddenly, the man remembers something and cracks a very strange smile. He says he has a gift to celebrate the young man's acceptance into college. The gift has to do with the game La Vida Online and his rank of 93, and reveals that he deleted all the data for the character he leveled up for years. The boy is in disbelief and asks how he knows about the game. With a victorious smile, the man reveals he's ranked 5th. He introduces himself as Step, and this leaves the protagonist shocked. The ranking list shows the name Step in 5th place, which is very famous. He explains that with 30 minutes and money, you can get to the top of the game. The boy feels completely defeated, and without any strength. Then the older man grabs him and starts talking about the rivalry with his father. He throws the young man to the ground and shouts that all of this is his revenge. Shinobu says he no longer feels anger, but fear, and decides to leave. But the man stops him, saying he has a surprise for Megumi too. The protagonist gets tense and asks what kind of surprise that would be. The villain then remembers the cat he gave to the girl. The young man connects the dots and asks what he did to the cat, Mocha. With cynicism, the man just comments that the animal was very cute and coldly reveals that he threw the cat out with the trash. He gave her pills to make her sleep and put her in a bag, since he can't stand those who don't love him. At this, the boy realizes he's dealing with a truly twisted person. He understands that he needs to get his sister and run away from there as fast as possible. When he tries to run, the older man suddenly turns around. A mysterious force shoves him hard, making him lose his balance. With that, the young man falls hard to the ground, not understanding what happened. He feels a lot of pain in his face, and says something pushed him down. Suddenly, a huge fire explosion happens right behind him. The boy looks back shocked, wondering what just happened. He sees the older man being engulfed by the flames, crying for help. The man's figure screams desperately as the fire consumes him. The boy is frozen in fear, watching the terrible scene in front of him. But he decides he doesn't care about that man's fate. His only priority now is to find and save his sister, Megumi. The girl appears, scared, asking about the explosion she heard. Her brother quickly warns her that the apartment is on fire. He yells for her to run as the flames spread through the place. The fire spreads very quickly and ends up blocking their path. Seeing the danger, he pulls his sister close to protect her. Then he grabs a blanket to try to get through the flames with her. From outside, we see the building in flames while the siblings are trapped. He says they need to jump, but his sister is scared because they're on the 12th floor. The boy points to a temporary roof that could cushion their fall. Then he says he'll cushion the impact for her, but the girl doesn't agree. She says that if they stay there, they'll both end up badly anyway. In that case, he yells that the only option they have is to jump, and without a second thought, the two siblings jump from the burning building. As they fall, the young man thinks that this will be the end of the line for them. He regrets not having at least punched that man once before all this, but his top priority is to hug and protect his sister, Megumi, during the fall. The roof he saw earlier seems to be the only salvation for them. The impact is brutal, and the boy ends up getting hurt very badly. Suddenly, the scene changes, and he finds himself in the world of La Vida Online. He watches several meteors falling from the sky in a spectacle of lights. In the midst of it all, a giant and imposing dragon appears on the horizon. Soon after, several other dragons appear, flying and landing nearby. The scene changes, and he is now a child doing math problems. He starts to remember information about his life, like the school he attended. Then he recalls that he jumped from the building to try to save his sister. At that moment, he realizes he's holding a sword in his right hand. The young man thinks this must be that whole reincarnation in another world thing, but he corrects himself and realizes he was reincarnated inside the game La Vida Online. He remembers wanting to be gone and ended up reincarnated in the game he loved so much. However, his max level was reset to 1 because of that psycho. Amidst this, he wonders what happened to Ayumu and Megumi. His main question is whether his dear sister managed to survive, and in his confusion and fear, the undead knight appears again. Besides him, the giant skeletal bird also reappears to attack him. He vividly remembers his first experience of being defeated in this world, but he revived quickly and now checks the wound on his stomach. He understands that here, he returns to the starting point with no penalty. However, the pain and suffering of being defeated are completely real, but he knows the tutorial well and knows what to do to pass. He sees some goblins and thinks it might be possible to get out of there, but he knows that at his current level, it would be difficult to survive. He questions if he should just live as a common citizen now, but a goblin attacks him with a very large wooden club. The boy easily dodges and lands a strong punch on the monster. With the victory, he levels up, and the system tells him to collect the rewards. He receives a recovery orb, and a shadowy figure appears. A giant orc attacks him with an axe, but he defends himself. The boy wonders what he should do in this new world. He casts a fireball and defeats the creature with ease. Not knowing what to do, he just stands still in the forest. Then he opens his status menu to analyze his options. A house appears in the middle of nowhere, and he approaches to see it. A bright blue orb floats in the middle of the house's room. He realizes he has reached the end of the tutorial and needs to collect the key. The system informs him that the tutorial is over, and he asks about the others. He is shocked to see a list with over 300 players. If the status is red, it means they have been taken down, and he discovers that the reincarnated players are taking each other out. Suddenly, he remembers Megumi and becomes very worried. If he is here, then what could have happened to his sister? He searches the list and finds the name Step, who is also in the game. The young man fears what could happen if Megumi were to find him. He looks for her name on the list and, to his relief, doesn't find it. Then he realizes she might not have perished in the fall from the building. The boy gets the idea that there's a separate list for anonymous accounts. He finds his name in Megumi's, who is alive in a hospital in Tokyo. He reads her condition as vegetative, with a scheduled login, so this means Megumi is in a vegetative state after the fall. The time of 250, 2 hours is a countdown for her life. He imagines his sister passing on, and the villain appearing to receive her. The man welcomes her to the world of La Vida with a cruel smile. Desperate, he swears he will never let that man touch his sister. A voice in his head advises him to calm down and think clearly. With determination, he decides that the only option is to find and protect Megumi, but the villain is at max level with lots of paid equipment. Meanwhile, he is just a weakling at level 3 and worries about the fight. The story goes back to a moment before all the chaos happened. The boy looks at his phone while his sister watches him from afar. The girl lies on the bed and asks to talk with him for a bit, but he's watching a video and says he'll talk to her later. The video on the screen is about how to reach level 99 in the tutorial. A YouTuber presents a crazy idea for the game La Vida Online. His plan is called Zombie Attack, and it's about leveling up in the tutorial. The trap for beginners is that if you hesitate, you go back to the start. But the YouTuber says the plan isn't to hunt monsters to level up. He explains that hunting the undead only gets you to level 15. Then the video starts explaining the game's story for newcomers. The premise is to escape the southern ruins and head north. By going the opposite way, the player faces stronger enemies and levels up. The idea is to take on high-level dungeons even as a beginner. The challenge lasts for 300 hours, and the comments think it's insane. The protagonist remembers he was about to watch that video. With a new perspective, he stands up with more determination. He yells to the game's god that he's ready to register his name. The system accepts the request, and he chooses his real name, Shinobu Ujima. He promises to protect Megumi, and his name is officially registered. Angrily, he shouts that he doesn't want the orb and decides to refuse it. The system warns that there will be a penalty, and he accepts without thinking. He leaves the house, and the system warns him that he has encountered an enemy. Again, he is attacked and defeated by the undead knight. The creature's spear pierces him, and he is taken down for the second time. Even injured, he smiles and understands that this is his fate now. The boy returns to the tutorial house and prepares for the next enemy. With a smile, he says that accepting the penalty has its benefits. He fights the skeleton again and manages to defend against the attack. But the creature attacks him again with force, hitting his shoulder. With the sword in hand, he prepares for the next move. The pain is intense, but he was prepared for it this time. He prepares to begin his journey of leveling up in the tutorial. The time limit is 240 hours for him to get strong. A skeleton mage appears and casts a powerful spell against him. The boy lies on the grass, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. Suddenly, he remembers he forgot to use a protection spell. He gets up and returns to the tutorial house to try again. After several attempts, he finally memorizes the enemy's pattern. The knight attacks him, but he manages to defend himself with his sword. Still, the creature's attack is strong and pushes him back. The mage casts the same spell as before, and he already knows what to do. With determination, he runs to finish the fight against the mage, but his attack is too shallow and doesn't cause much damage. The mage's eye glows, and it prepares a new attack spell. He counterattacks with a quick and precise strike on the creature. The boy revives once more on the grass. Frustrated with the defeats, he returns to the house and prepares for another round of fights. He grabs the knight's spear and successfully blocks the attack. Tired and dirty, he looks up and sees the giant bird flying. The bird dives at high speed to attack the protagonist. He uses his fire magic to defend himself from the creature's attack. With the explosion, the bird is defeated, and the boy levels up. After another round, he faces 3 knights. He levels up again and continues his journey of leveling up. Tired but determined, he says he won't give up on getting strong. He continues fighting various monsters and leveling up. A cursed armor with a recommended level of 85 appears. The Dark Knight faces him with a sword of evil energy. After a lot of training, He's already at level 50 and ready to fight. The armor attacks with a powerful strike, but he calmly dodges it. He knows that physical attacks have a knockback effect on the opponent. With a sphere of light, he attacks the armor with a magic spell. He steps on the armor's head and finishes it with a precise blow. A dark elf named Richie suddenly appears on the battlefield. With a beam of light, she attacks the armor with a recommended level of 80. He realizes that if he can defeat Richie, he will get stronger. Soon after, several horned demons appear for combat. It's the 20th time he's fought them, and he has memorized their moves. He uses an ice spell and freezes all the enemies at once. The boy says he has been defeated and revived so many times that he has learned how to fight. And with a determined look, he states that he won't keep losing. He finally reaches the southern ruins, the final objective of the tutorial. A gigantic horde of skeleton knights awaits him at the location. With a confident smile, he says he finally managed to get there. But first, he needs to clear the path and defeat all the enemies. He uses a special glove and says that numbers won't overwhelm him, and asks if the skeletons know what a level 50 tactical weapon is. He explains that in small battles, one person can make a difference. With immense power, he launches a miniature nuclear explosion. After the smoke clears, he prepares for the next challenge. With determination, he runs toward the Temple of the Ruins. He reaches the top and takes a deep breath, preparing for what's next. With a serious look, he focuses for the final battle. He shouts the name of the lifeless king, the final boss of the tutorial. A skeletal hand with sharp claws emerges from the shadows. The lifeless king appears on his throne with a recommended level of 95. The boss uses a level 5 skill, making the boy tense. With death sentence, it launches a deadly energy beam. The attack is very fast and hits the protagonist head on. He falls to the ground, feeling immense pain and not understanding anything. The boy revives once more on the grass and laments his defeat. But with a determined smile, he says there's no enemy he can't beat. He returns to the temple, and the lifeless king stares at him from his throne. The boss uses the same attack as before, and the boy barely dodges it. He realizes that the first attack is a test for the players. The lifeless king prepares its second attack, an energy cannon. A sphere of power forms in its hands with a dark aura. The protagonist shouts and charges forward to attack the boss without fear. He uses the skill Hades Rose, a level 5 defense. A barrier of black roses protects him from the king's attack. The advanced skill leaves him shocked with so much power. The boy revives again on the grass, frustrated with another defeat. He understands that just knowing the pattern isn't enough to win, so he needs to improve his reaction speed to dodge. He returns once more to the temple and faces the final boss. The lifeless king prepares a new attack with a sphere of energy. He dodges the first attack and prepares for the next move. With a smile, he says he's already used to both attacks. The boss uses Hades Rose to defend against the counterattack. To defend himself, he uses an extra magic guard with all his strength. The two powers collide, creating an immense energy explosion. The boss feels the pressure of the blow and complains that it's a tight spot, but the boy knows that for high-level spells, the limit is 3 hits. The petals of Hades Rose begin to fall apart before the power. At this, he notices an opening in the giant skeleton's defense. So he says it's his turn and prepares a holy purification. A golden light concentrates in his hand, ready for the attack. The boy launches Seraph's Call toward the enemy, but the blow simply vanishes into thin air, leaving the boy confused. He remembers a special undead ability, Dark Crossing. The skeleton boss appears on top of the temple, and he wonders where it went. With a smile, the young adventurer looks down confidently. The lifeless king emerges from his shadow, ready for a surprise attack. The enemy hits him with its staff, throwing him hard onto the ground, but he noticed there's a slight delay before the monster attacks. He says next time he'll use the purification, and that he'll let it go for now. In exchange for all his HP and MP, he will use a self-destruction skill. He activates the level 3 skill called Suicide without hesitation. A gigantic explosion of purple energy consumes everything around. The boy revives, panting on the grass, feeling the consequences of the blow. He feels immense pain, as if his body were exploding from the inside. Despite the pain, He wonders if he managed to defeat the boss and level up. Disappointed, he realizes he can't beat that enemy yet. With a sad look, he thinks there's no way to save Megumi like this. Suddenly, the 7th challenge appears, a level 85 army from hell. Later, we see the 10th challenge, and the boy with a scythe among the enemies. The fight against the lifeless king continues, and the boss uses its rose attack. The boy, now with a scythe, attacks the monster with more agility. He gets close to the boss and prepares another light attack to finish it. Smoke rises as the blow hits the skeleton head-on. With a keen eye, he notices the shadow on the monster's neck is slow, so he seizes the chance and attacks the lifeless king's weak spot. With the precise blow, the boss's head turns to dust on the floor. A system message appears and informs him that he has finally leveled up, but with a determined look, he says he needs to keep fighting. His goal is to defeat the lifeless king, no matter how many times it takes. The challenges continue, and he attacks the boss once more with full power. Now more experienced, he faces the monster's attacks with his scythe. Time passes, and there are 36 hours left until Megumi logs into the game. He returns to the tutorial house and faces the blue orb in the center. Upon touching the item, he gains a new set of armor and reaches level 77. He says he will enter the world where that filth is to protect his sister. In his mind, he sees the villain harassing Megumi and saying he desired her. The man approaches her with a sick look, saying he waited for her. The girl tries to defend herself and pushes him away with all her strength. Suddenly, the young woman is surrounded by a sea of intense flames. The villain in armor says that in this world, he is an all-powerful god. He claims that the words of a god are absolute and indisputable. The girl is attacked and screams for her brother, asking to be saved. Back in reality, the boy is in disbelief at what he imagined. He looks at his stats and sees that normal enemies are no longer a problem, but he worries about the other reincarnated players at max level. The young man wonders why he went through so much trouble in the tutorial. He remembers that as a summoner, he lost his beasts and decides to test the summon. A notice says his summoned beast is gone, leaving him in shock. To use it again, he needs to restore it at a recovery facility. He understands he needs to find a place to heal his summoned beast. The boy holds the image of his little creature and promises to revive it. With determination, he plans to use the recovery facility after the tutorial. He says he needs to be prepared when Megumi arrives and completes the tutorial. The system thanks him and informs him he will receive a skill orb as a bonus. The transfer will begin in 2 minutes, and he wonders what that orb is. A screen shows the item's name, Professional Skill Orb. So, without wasting time, he uses his appraisal skill on the new item. The skill is Divine Release, which increases subordinates' stats by 11 times. He is shocked because this should only arrive in a future game update. The system transports him to a new place and announces his first login. He remembers that the game was a test version and has now been updated. A campaign appears with a special dungeon called 13 Steps to the Ideal City, but he is frightened because defeat is now permanent. Unlike in the original game, a golden key of Babylon appears before him for the challenge. A voice welcomes him to the Ideal City and suddenly attacks him. Suddenly, he appears in a dark cave, not understanding what happened. The boy looks down and sees a group of goblins with crowns observing him. This is the first step of the dungeon, and he faces the Goblin King. He hides and notices there's a whole group of Goblin Kings there. Hidden behind a rock, he tries to calmly analyze the situation. With a focused gaze, he aims at one of the goblins to see its powers, but upon reading the creature's information, he is completely shocked. The appraisal shows a mythical goblin, and he can't see its stats because he is too weak. He realizes the game's max level has increased from 99 to 130. To beat the lifeless king, he needed dozens of attempts with great effort. But this creature is 50 levels higher, and he needs to fight to get out of there. In other words, he knows that fighting these monsters is the end. Desperate, he wonders if he's going to be defeated. Since it's now forever, he starts to tremble with fear as one of the goblins approaches him. The creature glares at him with a furious look and very sharp teeth. With his heart in his throat, the boy can't look away from the monster. Then he despairs and screams, because he knows the situation has become very bad. The red-eyed goblins rush to attack the boy without mercy. He is surprised by the monster's speed and can barely react. With a scared look, he realizes he can't react in time to the blow. One of the goblins attacks him with a very powerful red energy strike. He is hit head-on, and a cut suddenly opens on his stomach. The boy understands that the level difference between them is too great. Another goblin attacks him and hits him square in the chest with its sword. Injured, he looks at his status screen and sees his life is running out. With only 2 hits, he is already on the brink of defeat with 98 health. The creatures stare at him with an evil smile, enjoying the situation. He realizes the monsters are completely underestimating him in the fight. The boy knows that if this continues, he will be defeated in an instant. But he knows the game La Vida inside and out, and has a card up his sleeve. He asks Megumi to pray for him and prepares to use his final ability. Without hesitation, he uses the level 3 skill Suicide once more. An explosion of purple energy consumes one of the goblins completely. His body begins to disintegrate into particles of light after using the magic. His life reaches 0, and the recovery orb appears to save him. The light particles come together, and his body is slowly reconstructed. He holds the sphere of light in his hands as he slowly comes back to life. With a smile of relief, he realizes he managed to come back and is alive. The suicide spell consumes all HP and MP to create an explosive inferno. Recovery orbs are unique healing items in La Vida and restore everything. With this combination, he can use the suicide spell repeatedly. But the window to use the ability is very short, and he needs to be fast. The other goblins become furious upon seeing their companion defeated on the ground. They run toward him, ready to finish the boy off once and for all. With a furious scream, he uses the suicide ability once more. Another explosion of purple energy consumes all the monsters around. His life reaches 0 again, and the recovery orb revives him instantly. With eyes full of fury, he decides to fight until his last orb. He continues the attack and uses suicide again without a second thought. The explosion consumes him, and his recovery orbs decrease one by one. He needs to concentrate so as not to miss the timing even for a second. His body rebuilds itself, and he prepares for the next attack. With determination, he says he cannot be defeated. No way. The orbs continue to decrease, and his body glows with regeneration. He yells for the goblins to be defeated and uses the spell faster. With a cry of rage, he unleashes all his power against the enemies. Several explosions happen at the same time, destroying everything around. After the smoke clears, he sits in the cave among the fallen monsters. The system announces that he has leveled up several times and cleared the first floor. Tired and surprised, he wonders if he has finally managed to win the fight. He reaches level 80 and unlocks level 5 magic. Relieved, the boy sits on the ground, looking at the inert bodies of the goblins. He says he's physically fine but mentally exhausted. With the dungeon complete, he is happy to have survived. Suddenly, an announcement screen appears before him with an update. The message is sent to all players who have entered La Vida online. Other players also receive the notice of the new special dungeon. The max level has been removed, and the update occurred when the last player entered. The system shows that there are 10 months and 28 days until the final login. The boy is now in a field of lava and volcanic rocks. A screen shows Megumi's status in a vegetative state in a hospital. With a determined look, he says that he is waiting for his sister, but he realizes that for him, only 2 hours have passed since the tutorial, so he wonders if time passes differently on Earth and in that world. 2 hours in the tutorial are almost a year here, and he was there for 250 hours. He understands that this world is 100 years in the future from what he knew. Surrounded by data, he questions about the first to be reincarnated and the rules of the world. He thinks that the other players might have become very strong. For now, he needs more information and decides to go to the Lyric Empire. He then moves quickly through the rocky scenery of the place. The young man knows he first needs to heal his summoned beast to fight. Normally, he would use a recovery facility, but now he has an item. In his item box is the subordinate rescue skill orb. With this item, He can revive his beasts without needing to go to a specific place. He flies through the skies, still confused by the 100-year time jump. But the boy thinks it's better not to use this rescue ability for now. Above all, he doesn't want other reincarnated people to know where he is. The adventurer decides to go to the guild to get some information. While jumping through the trees, he notices something strange and stops in mid-air. Right below, he sees a group of giant ogres attacking some knights. The disaster certification says the level to defeat an ogre is 20. The boy hides and watches the ogres mercilessly taking down the soldiers. One of the knights screams in desperation, knowing they are no match for them. Hidden, he wonders why knights can't handle an ogre. One soldier tells the other to retreat, and the boy uses appraisal to see their stats. He notices that the level 10 knight has only 250 HP. One of the soldiers shouts for them to hold on, waiting for help from a Lord Jacob. At that, one of the ogres attacks with force and hits one of the knights squarely. The injured soldier says he can't take it anymore, and his friend tells him to run. From the top of the tree, he wonders where this person they trust so much is. He thinks he can abandon them, but also doesn't want to draw attention. So he decides to defeat all the ogres at once and flee quickly. He thinks that level 4 and 5 spells are overkill and too flashy. A strike of that level would definitely draw a lot of attention to him. The boy considers using level 1 or 3 spells for the situation. He then chooses a level 1 skill called Inflammation. With a smile, he prepares his magic and casts it toward the enemies. He then decides to use a level 2 spell to end the fight. Meanwhile, one of the ogres prepares to smash a knight on the ground. With a furious look, the creature glares at the soldier with its sharp teeth. Suddenly, the knights are confused and don't understand what happened. Even the ogre is surprised and stops its attack midway. From a distance, the boy casts his fire ability against all the monsters. He creates several spheres of fire and throws them at the giant enemies. One of the spheres hits a creature head on and creates an explosion. The other fire strikes hit the remaining ogres in a shower of flames. The flames consume the monsters, who have no chance to react to the attack. One of the knights asks if the fight is over, and the other tells him to look. The soldier is completely in shock at the scene of destruction. All the ogres were defeated, and they wonder who used the magic. One of them believes it was Lord Jacob, who saved them with his power. With a smile, the boy is glad that this Jacob person took the credit. He flies through the forest and decides to camp since the fight took a long time. But he feels something strange in the air, but thinks everything will be fine. The young man remembers that the meat of high orcs is very tasty, especially a roasted high orc, which is a very famous delicacy. He flies, thinking he never imagined he'd get the chance to try it. Suddenly, the adventurer stops in mid-air, sensing something is wrong there. Right below, he sees a group of orcs attacking more knights in the forest. He analyzes the situation and decides to check the levels of the new soldiers. The boy notices that their levels range from 5 to 10, very weak. In addition, their stats don't match their power levels. With a worried look, he decides he needs to help that group. He approaches and realizes he can't use area of effect magic without hurting them, so he uses a tracking spell and gets a soldier's attention. The knight asks what he's doing there with monsters nearby. The soldier puts a hand on his shoulder, trying to get him out of danger. The knight says that only B-rank adventures and above are welcome there. Then he looks at the carriage and calls him a poor adventurer from the countryside. Suddenly, a man in silk clothes and expensive ornaments gets out of the vehicle. With a smug smile, he says that's how real adventurers act. Our hero finds the guy very suspicious and his clothes very strange. This Jacob then makes fun of our young adventurer's all-black coat, but he changes the subject and says with a smile that it's time to make money. At that moment, they are surrounded by a huge group of high orcs. The knight calls for his lord Jacob as he prepares for battle. The boy understands that this is the Jacob who got the credit for his magic. Jacob complains that the young man has no manners for calling him by his first name. The soldier asks Jacob not to waste time, but he says that time is money. Jacob then asks where he should shoot, and the knight is astonished by the question. The man explains that he can handle a few of them, with his level 2 fire. But our hero knows that to defeat all of them, he needs more than that. The adventurer says he wasn't paid for this, and that he'll leave them behind. The boy thinks that with a few more shots, the level 2 spell would be enough. He realizes he needs to act, because he can't let those people get defeated. Jacob tells the young man to burn the monsters. Since he can't do anything, the hero then prepares to use a level 3 ability without hesitation. The other adventurer is shocked and asks if he's kidding. Then the boy casts the breath of the fire dragon, king against all the enemies. Jacob screams, completely shocked by the power of the spell that was used. An immense wave of fire consumes all the orcs that were in the way. Amidst the flames, the boy faces Jacob, who calls him a fool for the spell. The man recognizes the legendary magic. He tried to learn his whole life. The hero says the view is better and prepares to finish off the orcs. The other adventurer is still in shock from the power of the level 3 skill. Without wasting time, the boy casts the breath of the fire dragon king once more. Jacob despairs upon seeing the legendary magic being used in sequence. The orcs scream in pain and fury as they are completely consumed by the flames. The boy uses the breath of the fire dragon king for the 3rd time in a row. Jacob falls to the ground in disbelief at the triple attack from the mysterious young man. He freaks out, saying such calculation power would be impossible for a human. Suddenly, all the knights kneel and call him the great sage. Their leader says it's a great honor to meet him, leaving the boy surprised. The young man asks if they aren't overreacting because of a little magic, but the soldier insists that only a great sage could use such power. From their reaction, the protagonist realizes how weak this world has become. Jacob despairs, and a soldier praises his lord for mastering level 2 magic. Excited, the knight says that Jacob is a great B-rank adventurer. Our hero has a bored expression upon hearing that level 2 is a big deal. The soldiers conclude that if Jacob couldn't do it, it could only be the great sage. They all thank the boy for saving their lives from danger. The adventurer accepts their thanks and understands what is happening there. He realizes that the people of this world have become incredibly weak, but the young man knows he can't let that information spread, so he decides he needs to erase their memories to protect himself. One of the knights feels an immense energy building up and gets scared. The boy decides to erase the memory of everyone who saw his power in action. He concentrates a sphere of purple energy in his hands for the spell. Jacob and the knight scream in terror at the powerful and unknown magic. Our hero uses a level 1 ability with his magic staff. The name of the spell is Brain Jack, and a wave of purple energy spreads out. The magic hits everyone and erases their memories of the fight that happened. One of the knights falls unconscious to the ground after being hit by the blow. He wakes up confused and asks what happened, and the other says they were saved. The soldiers remember that they were saved by the incredible magic of Lord Jacob. From a distance, the boy watches and confirms that the memory spell worked. He rewrote their memory because helping people makes him feel good. With that, he uses his fire magic to deal with the fallen knights. In the forged memory, Jacob despairs and screams for help in the middle of the fire. He then stands up amidst the flames and stares at the boy with a serious look. His expression changes completely, and he seems very irritated with the situation. The man approaches and asks what the great sage is doing there. With a suspicious look, he remembers the memory manipulation he suffered. Our hero is surprised and wonders if his brain jack spell failed. Jacob steps on a knight's hand and calls the young man a Tensaisha. He reveals that he knows the boy tried to hide his identity as a reincarnated person, so he decides to finish off the knights to leave no witnesses. With an evil smile, he says it's better to eliminate them all to be sure. The protagonist calls him insane and wonders if he knows about the reincarnation. But the other adventurer laughs and says he noticed the memory manipulation. He explains that if a stronger mage is discovered, his own value will drop. Our hero is in shock as he understands the situation involves both of them. Confused, he asks why Jacob's memories didn't disappear. The man reveals he activated a special item that protected him from the spell. The item is the mysterious Alexandrite stone which nullifies memory manipulation. He says the item was given to his family 100 years ago by a god. With a smile, he says it was a Tensaisha, just like the protagonist. 100 years ago, gods appeared and began to control the world from the shadows. The wars ended, but great conflicts began, and the influence continues. One of the factions is the Levita Empire, known as the Eye of the Tiger. Another is the Holy Church, which goes by the name of Dragon's Roar. Besides them, there is the Frontier Alliance, also called Tianxia. The Adventurers Guild is the famous Dawn Brigade, and finally, the Merchant Union, known as the Patriotic Lion. Jacob explains that these groups control everything, and their power only grows. The hero recognizes all the famous guilds from the game Levita Online. The man says that as a Tensensisha, he should already know this and just spoke out of habit. He understands that the people here know the reincarnated as gods, and with the uproar over level 3 magic, he understands the reason for the title. Jacob then faces him and says he's confused and asks how he is. The man ponders whether he should report him or exploit his weakness and power, but with an evil smile, he decides he will exploit him to the bone. The protagonist is confused and wonders what his weakness is. The other adventurer points out that he likes to mess with other people's memories. Jacob says he didn't eliminate them, which shows he has a limit. With a smile, he says he has a proposal and writes on a scroll. The man then hands the paper to the young man, who looks at it suspiciously. He proposes that the two of them have a duel to resolve the situation. The adventurer explains that it's a blood pact, and if you break it, it's over. The boy remembers that breaking a contract in the game meant the end. With a smile, Jacob asks if he's thinking of refusing the proposal, but he threatens him, saying that if he refuses, everyone will know of his existence. The contract says he can choose the location, and if he loses, he becomes a servant. The young man feels cornered and says he has no choice but to sign. He prepares to sign the contract for the duel against the other adventurer, but first, he asks if the man really thinks he can beat him. Jacob admits that in a normal fight, it would be impossible, but he has a plan. With a cunning smile, he says that if he can choose the location, the story changes. So he says for them to change locations, and the boy is left confused. Suddenly, the scenery begins to distort, and they are teleported. They appear in a strange place full of floating platforms. The protagonist is startled by the spatial transfer to that location. Jacob says his Kaken item will give him an absolute blessing in that place. This blessing allows him to rule over magical creatures and get closer to the gods. With a shout, he summons various creatures to serve him in battle. Our hero realizes that this is not a duel but a one-sided fight. Jacob stands amidst giant monsters, ready for the one-sided attack. Jacob, his eyes gleaming, says that this is not a duel but a massacre. Our hero understands that the enemy is using the 4 great spirits. The man laughs and says that even the boy lost his temper with his powerful invocation. Realizing his opponent's objective, he says he won't be able to hold back in the fight. The young man understands immediately that Jacob's true class is not that of a summoner, but by using a sacrifice as a catalyst, he can summon stronger spirits. His plan is to sacrifice the 4 spirits to bring something more powerful. With continuous sacrifices, the result of the invocation will be something incredible. In the game, this didn't exist, but in this world he can summon the demon god Lucifer. He knows that if this creature appears, it will be impossible to defeat it in its current state. But his special ability allows him to summon spirits without needing sacrifices. So he decides to act faster to win the duel with his summoning speed. Jacob laughs and says it doesn't matter, because in that space he can control even gods. The man then commands the 4 spirits to evolve to the 4th level of power. Our hero gets bored and wonders why all the fuss over a level 4, but he remembers that in this world a moment of carelessness can cost him his life, so he won't hold back. Furthermore, Jacob is the type of man who could take down soldiers without even blinking. The enemy challenges him to invoke and tells him to use everything he has without thinking. With a serious expression, the boy simply confirms that he understood his opponent's message. Then the young man says he won't hold back and activates his special ability. His ability, called Subordinate Rescue, is activated in the middle of the arena. With a determined look, He says that he too will fight with everything he has. A massive explosion of flames reveals its 5th-level power invocation. From the midst of the fire emerges the legendary flame dragon Emperor Bahamut. Jacob falls to the ground, completely shocked by the 5th-level summoning. He gets angry and shouts that he has a spirit that transcends human understanding, but their own 4th-level spirits are trembling with fear of the other creature. Desperate, he cannot believe that the boy invoked the strongest spirit god. The other adventurer is paralyzed with fear and hears that it is still too early to look away. Then the hero raises his staff and says that his full power begins now. Seeing his creatures fleeing, Jacob cries out desperately for them not to run, but the boy summons another 5th-level creature, the king of the seas, Leviathan. The other adventurer is even more terrified by the powerful new summon. Soon after, he brings the Thunder Emperor Indra and Mother Earth Gaia. The man is paralyzed with fear upon seeing so many powerful beings together. With an incredulous look, he sees the 4 level 5 creatures in the arena. The protagonist says that he finally managed to summon a 6th-level being. Suddenly, an intense light reveals a being with angel wings emerging. The invocation is to Seraphim Gabriel, a woman with the appearance of a maid. The enemy doesn't believe it and wonders what a 6th-level creature is. He stammers Gabriel's name, not understanding what is happening there. The powerful creature then lands gracefully in the battle arena. With an imposing pose, the Seraphim faces the other summoned spirits. With a single gesture, she unleashes a wave of power that shakes the entire place. Her presence causes other invocations to bow before her. The girl belongs to the Seraphim level, being of the same rank as Lucifer. He knew from the game settings, but seeing it in person is spectacular. Jacob completely freaks out and yells that he can't believe it. The hero observes him and realizes that the man has gone completely mad. He says he knew his opponent wasn't strong, so he was cautious. At that moment, the Seraphim approached and respectfully addressed him as Shinobu-sama. With a serious look, she says she's going to borrow the Leviathan for a bit. The great sea dragon understands the order and prepares for the attack. Suddenly, the enemy is seized and lifted into the air, unable to react. The Leviathan's tail strikes him forcefully and crushes him against the ground. Our hero approaches the impact site with a cold stare. He asks the Seraphim if she finished with him, and she confirms that she did. With a forced smile, he seems somewhat surprised by the brutality. On the ground, a pool of blood shows what remains of the defeated adventurer. The girl faces her master, awaiting the next order for battle. He looks away and can't believe the attitude of his summoning. Only a pool of blood remained on the ground where Jacob had once been. The young man then asks her what her reason was for killing the man. The Seraphim says that the only reason was that he opposed his master. Her response creates a completely awkward atmosphere between the two. Then the boy remembers what Gabriel's personality was like in the game. She treats her master like an absolute god and is a battle machine. With a sigh, he realizes that it was his fault for not stopping her. The girl asks if there's a problem, but he says it's too late. He then calls her by name, and she promptly responds to his call. Our hero tells her not to kill people so easily. She agrees, but the boy wonders if the summoning really understood. The Seraphim misunderstands and says that even villains should not be eliminated. She goes on to say that enemies must be crushed with absolute power. The young man becomes desperate and says that's not what he meant. Then he forbids death or torture and tells her to consult him first. The girl understands that he wants her to judge using modern Japanese morality. Surprised by her obedience, the boy breaks the summoning of the others. He decides to test her and asks if she would sacrifice herself if he ordered her to. Our hero raises his hand to stop him, but it's too late. Without hesitation, the Seraphim pierces her own chest with her hand. The boy is completely shocked by his servant's blind obedience. The girl then pulls a sphere of blue energy from within herself, handing over her core. She says she would gladly comply with the order. He wonders if this is serious, and if this is how loyalty works. The servant says that her body is strong, and he tells her to stop that. Desperate, the young man orders her to heal herself with magic immediately. As commanded, the Seraphim is healed instantly, and the wound closes. She apologizes for her words and offers to serve him day and night. The girl says she'll do anything from fighting to taking care of him at night. The boy is shocked and asks what she meant by nighttime care. The servant says that with utmost loyalty, she becomes his body and soul. With a flushed face, he begins to understand the implications of that conversation. He wonders if that also includes those more intimate things between them. The seraphim faces him and says that he will do anything his master wishes. Completely embarrassed, he asks what exactly she means by that. The girl closes her eyes and prepares to give a very practical example. Suddenly, she approaches him, leaving him completely surprised and speechless. With a smile, she says the situation is unexpected and asks what happened. But a system warning says the content is for ages 15 and up. The seraphim apologizes for not considering that he is still 17. The young man's face turns red as he remembers the adult version of the game. She then offers to show the top part since the rest is blocked. He is overcome with embarrassment and doesn't know how to react to his servant's proposal. Our hero turns his back to her, completely speechless. Then the girl starts to unbutton her clothes, but he stops her immediately. He says he doesn't like the idea of it being solely because of her loyalty. The seraphim readily accepts her master's command without question. To change the subject, he says it's better if they talk about the future, but the space where they are begins to completely collapse. The girl warns that the place is going to collapse because the conjurer is gone. She then excuses herself for a moment and quickly approaches him. The seraphim embraces him tightly to protect him from the collapse of the place. With a flushed face, he hears that they need to go to a safer place. An immense light envelopes them, and they are teleported out of there. The two then reappear in the middle of a forest, completely alone. At the seashore, the servant asks what he intends to do now. The boy says he's thinking of looking for some farmhands to help him. The girl is confused by the term and asks him what pawns mean. Then he explains that he is actually planning to form a group of adventurers. He says he's going to form a group with a special misfit in mind. On the way to the Empire, the boy remembers how he helped the soldiers in the forest. As a result, he summoned his main combat creature, the seraphim Gabriel. It was shocking how she tore out her own heart at his command to obey. The seraphim also take care of night duties, but there are some restrictions. A cautionary message appears with an age limit for what she can do. The girl asks what misfits are and suggests recruiting skilled people. The young man explains that just the two of them alone might not be enough. Around the campfire he eats, while explaining his logic to his servant. With a serious look, she asks if he's saying they're insufficient. The hero says that as a summoner, he has many restrictions and a group would defeat him. He goes on to say that if everyone attacked him, she wouldn't be able to protect him. Your servant agrees that it would be difficult to fight against a group of maxed out players. Despite this, she gets up and offers to help him in any way she can. He stops her immediately and says he hasn't told her anything yet. The boy yells at her to stop, trying to sacrifice herself so quickly for him. With a sigh of frustration, he sits down as she agrees to the order. Then, they continue the conversation, and the young man says that the others are already in groups. He agrees, and she worries that they are not enough on their own. The boy tells her not to worry, because the situation isn't that bad. If maximized players form a group, they end up fighting with others of the same strength. This same logic also applies to guilds that control territories. The servant understands that it is unlikely they will engage in direct combat with them. The young man confirms, but with a smile says that this is only for now. He explains that everyone else is just waiting for the right moment. The girl understands that they are waiting for an update to break the balance. With the update, they will be able to raise their level from 99 to 130. Once the limit is broken, whoever levels up quickly will surpass the others. The update date will coincide with your sister's login in about 10 months. He concludes that they need to find more pawns and recruit locals as allies. His servant questions him because she found the inhabitants of that world very weak. The boy confirms this but says he believes there's a reason for them being this way. He thinks that reincarnated beings from 100 years ago created flaws in their growth, but the young man says that if the peer support system works, they can grow. With this, the boy says that if he finds special humans, he can train them. He explains that the criteria are being between 12 and 15 years old and using evil magic. In other words, he is looking for children considered a failure. The girl understands the logic and asks where they can find these people. Our hero hesitates a little but says it's probably in that place. Soon after, they arrive in a city with cobblestone streets. The camera pans down, revealing that they are actually in a slave market. One of the guards attacks one of the prisoners with his magic. Inside a cage, two girls with animal ears look frightened. The boy watches in disgust as lives are treated in that filthy market. With his hand on his face, he laments but knows he needs to do this from Megumi. Then he turns to his servant and says that they will search among the slaves. To disguise herself, the girl changes her appearance to one with blonde hair. The young man is mesmerized by her new appearance, and she calls him. With a flushed face, he says it was nothing and feels captivated by her. In addition to the previous guidelines, he gives her a clear orientation. The boy asks if she is a goddess, and she says she is a divinity, so he suggests that she choose based on her intuition and perspective. The servant begins to examine the slaves and sees a girl with dog ears. Her red eyes gleam as she continues her watchful search. She then observes a boy with green horns chained in a cage. His eyes continue to scan all the prisoners in that place. His attention is drawn to a skeletal creature huddled in the corner. Suddenly their eyes light up when they meet someone who catches their eye. She focuses on a blue-haired girl chained in the cell. Her eyes widen as it seems she has found a potential talent. The seraphim calls to her master and points enthusiastically to one of the slaves. She says she sensed a talent for magic in the eyes of that boy in the cage, but the boy says it doesn't seem to be him and asks about the others there. Then, the servant points to another young man, but her master says that he is not him either. She insists on another boy, and the hero interrupts her, asking her to wait. The girl says she felt the magic flowing because that child is not a boy. The young man complains that she is being biased with her choices. She insists it's intuition, but he says it's just her preference. While she was choosing the protagonist, she says she also found someone. He is referring to a short-haired girl named Alice Cecile in a terrible state. With a determined look, he confirms that she is the one he was looking for. Inside the cage, the young woman stares at him with a weak and hopeless look. A screen displays the immense list of curses and negative effects on the girl. He is shocked by the absurd number of problems she has. A vendor approaches and explains that the girl is from the Dome tribe. Our hero doesn't care about the story and only asks the price. The merchant laughs, saying that touching it is dangerous, but it is untouched. He says her condition worsened and someone almost bought her before, but the girl ended up attacking the potential buyer during the negotiation. The young slave girl's eyes still shows a spark of defiance and will. In a flashback, she scratches and kicks the customer who tried to get close. The boy finds her temperament good and doesn't see it as a problem. An expression of surprise appears on the screen for a brief moment of shock. The hero offers a single silver coin to buy the girl from the cage. He hands over the coin and says that neither temperament nor curses matter. The seller thanks him and calls him a pervert while opening the cell. The young man asks Gabriel how long it will take to heal her, and she replies. With the cell door open, he approaches the young woman who is huddled on the floor. Our hero introduces himself as Shinobu and says he's there to help. But before anything else, he says he needs to confirm something with her. He assures her that she will not become a slave in any way. The boy explains that he is a powerful magician and is looking for a new disciple. With a gesture, he says that if she really wants to become stronger, she must accept. Then our hero extends his hand and invites her to be his apprentice. The girl is shocked and asks if he wants a disciple and not a slave. He confirms this and says he wants to make her strong because he has a goal to achieve. The young woman faces the man and repeats to herself that she needs to stay strong. The boy says he won't force her because he knows she doesn't trust him yet. But even if she refuses, he will treat her and take her to a safe place. With determination, she grabs his hand and says she wants to become strong. He asks her to trust him, but the young woman ends up fainting from weakness. In her memoirs, she remembers her village and everyone cheering for her. With a smile, the young woman bids farewell to everyone and leaves for the Magic Academy. Alone, she walks through the forest carrying her suitcase and her dreams. At the academy, the professor says that the time has come for everyone to accept the spirits. She explains that they will summon the third-level creatures that are the human limit. The instructor says that everyone will make contracts with the four great spirits. The young girl listens attentively as the teacher challenges the students to show their power. Standing before a large door, the girl anxiously awaits her summoning test. Then she is pushed and screams the names of the four spirits with all her might. The girl stands in the center of the large summoning circle on the floor of the room, but nothing happens and she can't even summon a single spirit. The other students call her useless and a disgrace to the academy. One of the students laughs and tells her to go back to her village and stay with the natives. With tears in her eyes, the young woman stares at her colleague with a look of pure fury. Without thinking twice, she attacks the boy and knocks him to the ground with a punch. She remembers her mother and the happy times they shared together in the village. The girl also remembers her whole family gathered together, smiling happily, and they embraced her tenderly and showed her all their love. Back to reality, she cries over the humiliations she suffered at the academy. The young woman screams in anguish and pain on the floor, feeling completely alone. After the incident, the teacher hands her a notification from the academy. The document is an order for immediate return to your village of origin. With the document in hand, the girl accepts her fate without saying a word. She then packs her things and begins her journey back home, alone. She walks through the forest carrying her suitcase and the shame of failure. The girl remembers her family smiling and waving proudly at her. With a heavy heart, she silently apologizes for having disappointed everyone, but she raises her head and smiles, thinking that she is happy to see them again. Suddenly, she sees her village completely engulfed in flames and is terrified. The young woman panics and wonders what is happening there. Amidst the flames, a mysterious man in a white suit observes her. He stares at her with a cold, emotionless look on his face. The man asks if she understands why her village was completely burned down. He explains that when he learned she had failed, the fate of the village was sealed. The villain says she has the potential to achieve his dominance, but that doesn't matter. With a wicked grin, he approaches her with a menacing aura. He asks if she hates him for destroying everything that was important. With a cold gaze, the man stares at the young woman surrounded by fire and pain. She stares at him and repeats that she hates him with all her heart and soul. With clenched teeth and eyes full of hatred, she screams that she wants to finish him off. The man observes her with a look of utter contempt and indifference. He says everything is fine and that she should get over her hatred for him. With a wicked grin, he says he will devour her for experience points. The villain says that's enough talk and prepares for the final blow. Suddenly, he unleashes a powerful spell that hits her directly. The girl is struck by a series of curses and negative effects. Fallen to the ground, she screams in pain as her body is consumed by magic. The man tells her to hate him and fight to survive with all her might. Then he tells her to grow strong and appear before him as experience. The man says he discarded his name when he was almost defeated once. With a smile, he reveals that people call him the God Killer. He says he doesn't need a name, but that this isn't a bad title. The villain's reflection burns in the young woman's eyes as she repeats his name. The man says that it's still not enough, and that he will become a warrior. Back in the present, the girl finally holds the hand of her new master. Our hero watches from afar as the salesman takes a child into a room. Then his servant calls him and says that everything is ready for the treatment. In bed, the young slave girl groans in pain, with several marks on her body. 10:30. He confirms and tells his servant to begin Alice's treatment. The girl says that even though she was a slave, he promised to make her his disciple. She then lists all the infections and curses that could destroy her. The boy knows that removing the curses would require a lot of money, The young woman says that for this, they would have to go to the church in the capital. Her servant interrupts her and says that her master asked her to heal her in 3 seconds. Then the seraphim says that she has a duty to treat her within that time. She reveals her true form and uses a 5th-level healing spell. The girl uses the seraphim's blessing and envelopes the young woman with her wings. With a gentle touch, the seraphim releases an immense wave of healing energy. An intense light fills the entire room, and the healing begins to take effect. Suddenly, the young woman is completely healed and has a radiant appearance. Confused, she asks why she no longer feels any pain in her body. Our hero confirms that all his curses have been completely cured. The girl doesn't believe it and wonders if it was a 5th-level spell. The servant says it is natural to be healed by the 5th-level seraphim blessing. Then she introduces herself as Gabriel, the highest-ranking angel. The young woman is surprised because the summoning resembles a human being. Suddenly, the seraphim lunges at the girl in bed, startling her. Gabriel apologizes to his master for his unexpected behavior. She then points to the young woman's thigh and says she forgot the slave mark. The servant says that the mark is not in effect and cannot be cured with the blessing. Suddenly, the slave mark on her thigh begins to glow with a blue light. The girl freaks out and asks if he was the one who made the mark suddenly disappear. Gabriel apologizes for taking more than 3 seconds, but he doesn't mind. Once recovered, the young woman asks who he is, and the boy tells her to go somewhere else. Then our hero approaches her and surprises her with his proximity. He picks her up like a bride, and the girl screams in fright at the action. With a red face, she says that he bought her and that she doesn't understand anything. He asks if anyone is watching, and his servant confirms that they are alone. The boy asks the young woman to calm down because she has been very agitated since early this morning. She panics and asks what he's going to do to her at that moment. The hero says that this is what he will do, and a blue aura surrounds them. Suddenly, they start flying, and the girl asks if it's flying magic. With a smile, he says that this is nothing compared to the shock before. The two continue to rise higher and higher toward the starry sky. The young woman is startled by the height and says that the flight only reaches 200 meters. But he explains that he is using 4th-level gravity annihilation. They rise so high that they surpass the clouds and reach outer space. The girl is speechless as she watches the clouds speeding past them. Completely shocked, she looks at the starry sky and the infinite space. Suddenly, she finds herself floating in space, looking at the blue planet. The boy asks if she is above the sky and calls her by the name Alice. He asks if she knew that there is a world of darkness above the sky. Then he says that as his disciple, she will learn many new things. With a smile, he says that if she is ever surprised, his body won't be able to handle it. The young woman replies that after this sight, nothing else can surprise her. Floating in space, the seraphim appears and calls him Shinobu-sama. She reports that the spatial connection to the Azana base is ready. Gabriel tells him to begin, and the boy picks up a dagger that glows intensely. The dagger emanates a powerful purple energy of 5th-level magical power. Our hero then uses his dagger to launch a dimensional slash into space. The young woman is shocked and realizes that he is literally cutting through space. With a flushed face, she says she won't be surprised by anything anymore. Meanwhile, Gabriel uses his magic to create a dimensional portal. The portal opens, revealing an immense castle, and the girl asks what it is. Holding the young woman, he says there is only one answer to her question. A wide view of the castle comes into view, and the boy says that this is his home. He then says that from today onwards, that place will also be her home. With a flushed face, the girl nervously agrees with her new master. He advises that they will go to the North Guard post, because the young woman is still level 1. Gabriel says it's the ideal place for her to level up because of the limit. The girl gets confused and asks if the level cap is 99. She then calls her master, who turns to hear what she has to say. The young woman feels useless and begins to list all her previous failures. With a sad look, she asks why he would choose someone like her. He holds her shoulders and says that she is not useless despite being ignorant. With a gentle pat on the head, he promises he will explain everything to her. The boy then says that she is no longer a slave, but rather his apprentice. He asks her to call him by his name, and the girl becomes very embarrassed. With a red face, she stammers and manages to call him Shinobu Sama. He strokes her hair and says he finds that form of treatment acceptable. In front of the castle, Gabriel says they need to hurry and go inside. Once inside the castle, he says he will explain why she didn't summon the spirits. The young woman then begins to talk about her grades at the Magic Academy. She reveals that her grades were so good that it was easier to count from the top. Then the servant asks the girl to explain the concept of levels to them. She explains that by defeating targets, her life force turns into experience points. The boy confirms and asks what it means when the status increases. The young woman says that growth is determined by the size of a modifier. The servant agrees and raises her finger to make her final observation. She is speechless and doesn't know how the size of the impulse is determined. The young woman explains that the growth in status happens through contracts with spirits. Without their blessing, the modifiers become 0 and the stats do not improve. The boy says she's getting close to what he meant by that. Contract modifiers determine the growth of each individual's status. He confirms and asks if she knows why those 4 spirits are chosen. The girl replies that she was taught in class to start with those 4. Our hero says that the limit for most humans is invoking these spirits. He asks if she needs a tip, and the young woman is confused by the question. The boy questions her about who he is and who is in front of her now. With a flushed face, she describes him as a powerful wizard who saved her. He smiles and confirms that he is an extremely powerful and skilled summoner. Gabriel says that he commands high-ranking spirits, including her, who is of the 6th order. The young woman is shocked to learn that he is a top-level player. Suddenly, she realizes the truth and freaks out at the possibility that has opened up. He says she can summon higher-level spirits that he has invoked. The boy reveals that his first contract at level 1 was with Bahamut. He reminds her that she wanted to become strong in order to defeat an enemy. With that, he remembers what the God's Lair said to the girl. The young woman now understands that the gods of that world are only 3rd tier. She is terrified at the idea of making a contract with a 5th-level spirit, but she recovers and tells herself not to be afraid of that opportunity. With her hands clasped, the girl remembers that she needs to get stronger. Before her, the 4 5th-level creatures appear imposing. She is impressed by the sight of the powerful 5th-level spirits. The Flame Dragon Emperor Bahamut stares at her with his red eyes. The King of the Seas, Leviathan, also watches over her with his majestic presence. Indra and Gaia also show themselves ready to serve their new mistress. They then offer to form a contract with the young apprentice. The girl wonders if it's okay for someone like her to do this. The young man and his servant look with pride at their new apprentice. With a flushed face and a shy look, the girl prepares for the contract. With determination, she shouts for the creatures to form a contract with her. The eyes of the 4 great 5th-level spirits shine brightly. A powerful aura of energy surrounds the young woman as she makes the pact. A burst of blue light confirms that the contract was made in her name. With her eyes closed, the girl feels the power of the spirits flowing. She opens her eyes, and a new confidence emerges in her determined gaze. Flower petals float around her, symbolizing her rebirth. Suddenly, a status screen appears in your hands with your new information. She examines her new powers and abilities with a look of surprise. Her face flushed, she stares at the screen, unable to believe what she is seeing. The young woman still can't believe she managed to form a contract with a spirit. Gabriel says that not just anyone can make a contract with spirits. Our hero confirms this and says that she performed at the same level as he did at the beginning. The servant explains that this means she has comparable potential to his. The boy tells her to focus on what's in front of her for now. He then hands her a magic staff, and the young woman holds it carefully. The hero also places a mysterious item on her back without her noticing. Confused, the girl asks what those items he just gave her are. He approaches her from behind and tells her to get ready for the test. With a flushed face, the young woman freaks out at the proximity of her master. Gabriel advises him to relax his body and point the staff forward. He tells her not to move, and the young woman's face turns even redder. With a smile, the boy asks her to look up and see what is approaching. Suddenly, a giant shadow appears in the sky and descends at high speed. A huge sky dragon appears flying towards them in the castle courtyard. The girl recognizes it from the monster encyclopedia as a rare calamity. She panics and asks why that dangerous creature is there. With a smile, the boy assures her that she will be fine if she uses basic magic. He says her status isn't enough, and this is her first time using magic. The young woman is startled and asks what he is talking about regarding mana control. Our hero says she will understand when it's all over and places his hand on hers. At that moment, the dragon of heaven stares at them with a menacing and dangerous look. Then the large creature flies at high speed towards them. With that, the beast opens its mouth to attack, and the young woman cries out her master's name. The boy then begins to recite an incantation to manifest the flames. The young woman feels an intense heat and recognizes that this is the power of the master. Thus, a 5th-level fire spell is cast from the magic staff. A massive fireball called the Fire God advances against the monster. The creature barely manages to dodge the powerful fire attack. The young woman is shocked that he deviated, but the master tells her not to worry. Then the fire magic changes direction and continues pursuing the creature. Suddenly, the spell turns into a net of light, trapping the flying monster. The creature is caught in the net of light and is completely annihilated by the magic. The young woman is shocked by the power she used and is unable to say anything. She apologizes, embarrassed, but he smiles and tells her not to worry. He says that for a new contract, she must reach level 20 and points out, for this, he asks her to use a spell on the creature's wreckage. The apprentice reminds everyone that she is at level 1, and the magic requires level 5. The boy confirms the information, but tells her to trust him and try anyway. Even though she's a little scared, the young woman agrees to try casting the spell. The girl focuses on the staff, while her master watches from afar. A fiery aura surrounds her as she prepares the first-level spell. She shouts the spell's name, and a small flame of fire comes out of the staff. The small flame reaches the remains of the monster and causes an explosion. The apprentice is surprised that the spell worked, and her master observes her. Suddenly, a letter of status appears in her hand, and she picks it up to look at it. She looks at the card and sees that it's now level 5, becoming completely shocked. She remembers seeing level 5 statuses, but hers are double the normal level. The young woman then wonders why she leveled up, if it was his magic that won. Confused, the girl looks at the necklace she is wearing around her neck. The servant explains that experience is gained by defeating enemies, but with the friendship necklace, the points are divided among the whole group. With a flushed face, she understands why she gained so much experience at once. The apprentice then excitedly asks if she can reach the maximum level with this. The boy says the item's limit is level 5, and the young woman is disappointed. He says that to use Magic-y, you need a book to imprint the formula on your mind. Our hero corrects us, saying that it is actually a scroll. He then asks where the item is, and the girl says it's at school. With a worried look, the young woman realizes the problem she has just created. The boy steps forward and says that she learns things very quickly. Starting tomorrow, she will return to school and train with him in the morning and afternoon. The girl is shocked by the heavy routine of studies and intense training. He reassures her, saying that he will guide her throughout the learning process. The young woman remains worried about the idea of having to go back to school. The boy says that now she can prove her worth to all her colleagues. With a smile, he asks if his new apprentice can trust him a little. With a flushed face and a sad look, the young woman agrees with her master. The next day, she is back in front of the Imperial Academy of Magic. The girl gets nervous when she arrives and tries to go unnoticed by everyone there. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls her name, and the young woman turns around startled. She recognizes the person who called her, and her expression becomes one of pure panic. Before her stands the imposing building of the Magic Academy she attends. The young woman is speechless when called by one of her classmates. The blonde girl approaches her and calls her name again with a smile. A beautiful young woman with blonde hair and an academy uniform appears in front of her. She introduces herself as Beatrice Hines, a student at the Magic Academy. The apprentice greets her with a downcast look and calls her Lady Beatrice. The blonde takes a step and says, "There's something strange about the girl in front of her." The blonde asks what she's doing there and calls her a useless, powerless failure. With a frightening face, she reminds the girl that she made no contract with the spirits. She then recalls that the young woman was expelled for hitting a classmate. With a mischievous smile, the blonde asks if her city wasn't destroyed. The apprentice remembers the fire in her city, and her gaze turns hateful. Her colleague continues to tease her about the fire and asks if she crawled back with a look of disdain. The blonde says she knows what really happened to her. The young woman is confused and doesn't understand what her colleague is trying to say. With this, the blonde reveals that the apprentice was sold on the human trafficking market. The girl gets very angry and grinds her teeth at her classmate's provocation. The blonde laughs and asks if she hit the nail on the head regarding the new apprentice's weak spot. With a psychotic expression, she says that the young woman's lack of denial confirms everything. The colleague continues to humiliate her and lists all her supposed embarrassments. With a loud laugh, the blonde calls her pathetic and mocks her situation. The young woman stares at her with a serious, cold look without saying a single word. The commotion draws attention, and a man asks why they are fighting. A teacher appears and asks if they are there for the placement exam. The apprentice says that they haven't yet chosen their partners for the final exam. The blonde has a mischievous idea, and her eyes sparkle with a plan in mind. She approaches the professor and asks to take the exam with her friend. With a smile, she offers a handful of gold coins to the professor. With a sweet yet wicked look, she begs him to accept her request. The professor accepts the bribe, and the blonde thanks him with a victorious smile. She then turns to the young woman and says that she will count on her help in the exam. In the academy courtyard, the two prepare for the start of the magic exam. The blonde asks the apprentice how she is feeling at that moment. The young woman says she is not feeling well because of her colleague's rude words. The blonde says she doesn't care about her feelings about her people. She says the test is about how many times you can use a basic spell. The young woman turns to her and asks how the blonde is feeling now. With a serious look, the young woman asks if they can start the test right away. The classmate is surprised by the girl's confident attitude. With a smile, she agrees to begin and says she can be generous. The blonde says it has always been unpleasant to sit next to her in the classroom. She then turns to the teacher and prepares to begin the test. With a smile, she boasts of being able to cast 7 spells in a row. The apprentice then casts the spell first, causing a giant explosion. The colleague and the professor are shocked by the display of power. The blonde accuses the young woman of using a trick to hide her weakness. The apprentice confirms that she was sold and that her purity was for sale. The colleague gets excited by the gossip and asks a very unpleasant question, but the young woman says she was defending herself from a client, and that's why nobody bought her. The blonde laughs and calls her useless, even to be a slave. She prepares to show off her magic and humiliate the apprentice once and for all. The colleague then launches a series of small fireballs at the target. The fireballs strike the pillar and cause small holes in the structure. She boasts of her magic and turns to cast another spell on the pillar. But the young woman's target had already been completely destroyed by the explosion. Angrily, the blonde accuses the apprentice of using a very elaborate trick. Even furious, she continues to cast her spells on what remains of the target. She reaches her limit, and the young woman watches her with a smile on her face. The colleague shouts, and the apprentice remembers that her master praised and saved her. In anger, she threatens the young woman and says she will use her father to get revenge. The apprentice then orders her classmate to be quiet at once. The blonde is shocked by the girl's audacity and doesn't know what to say. An aura of fire surrounds the young woman, who tells her colleague to shut up. With a smile, she confirms what she said and doesn't regret anything. The colleague's face turns red with anger, and she trembles with pure fury. The apprentice then prepares to cast her fire spell once more. Several fireballs appear in the sky and the blonde is shocked by the sight. The colleague is stunned by the scene and can't believe what she sees. Fireballs fall from the sky and destroy everything in the academy courtyard. A cloud of smoke and dust rises with the impact of the powerful magic. The blonde falls to the ground defeated, and the professor says the target has been destroyed. The young woman remembers that her master accepted her, and that she is not a failure. With this, she shouts that she cannot afford to be a loser. Then she approaches the professor to find out the result of the test. The man stares at his clipboard, shocked by what he has just witnessed. Without words, the professor simply says the girl's name and becomes thoughtful. He then announces that she will be in the honor class at the Magic Academy. At dusk, we see a luxurious mansion illuminated by the setting sun. Inside, a man kneels and begs forgiveness from Marquis Kashin Heisen. But the nobleman shows no mercy and punishes him for his grotesque mistake. The Marquis says that he underestimated the power granted by the Reincarnator. He orders his guards to take the man away because he disobeyed orders. With a sigh, the nobleman complains about how useless all the commoners are. Suddenly, his daughter runs towards him with tears in her eyes. The young woman throws herself into her father's arms, completely desperate and crying. With a red face and crying profusely, she screams her father's name. The girl hugs him tightly, seeking solace for her suffering. The father comforts her and asks what happened at school to make her so upset. Crying, she shows her letter and complains about a commoner named Alice. The Marquis is confused by the name and asks who this Alice is. She boasts about having made a 7-hit combo and her father praises her. The blonde says she did everything with her own skill, but the native doesn't. She accuses the young woman of using a powerful and forbidden magical tool. With this item, the girl managed to perform dozens of attacks at once. The blonde says she was tricked with a dirty trick and wants revenge. Angrily, she says that the commoner has dishonored the daughter of the prestigious Heisen family. The father agrees and says that the girl should be expelled for humiliating his daughter. The Marquis thinks his daughter is telling lies to hide her own shame. Even though she is a fool, the nobleman says she is still precious to the family. With a smile, he tells the young woman not to worry about 1 or 2 commoners. He states that commoners who defy the nobility should be crushed. Suddenly, the Marquis's expression changes, and he looks worried. His face then contorts in pure panic, and he begins to sweat profusely. The young woman asks what's wrong with him, because she's never seen him like that before. She is baffled by her beloved father's strange and sudden reaction. Suddenly, a man with red hair appears and greets him with a good evening. The nobleman stammers Vlad's name and asks when he arrived there unexpectedly. Vampire says he sensed a disturbance in the country, and that's why he woke up earlier. The girl clings to her father and asks who that mysterious man is. The Marquis explains that he is Vlad the vampire progenitor, a divine and powerful being. The young woman is shocked to learn that she is standing before a supreme and legendary being. The father reveals that he is the secret of the house and the benefactor of the Heisen family. The girl then turns to the vampire and calls him by his full name. With a bow, she says it is an honor to meet him and introduces herself as Beatrice. The vampire surprises her by saying that he already knows everything about the girl in the family. He reveals that he hid his doubles not only in Kashin, but in her shadow. The blonde is shocked, and he says that because of this, he realized the disturbance. Vlad says that a monstrous being has emerged, and even he cannot measure the young woman's strength. He then recalls that earlier she had wished that the girl would be purged. With a smile, he says he will drink from Alice as a meal to awaken her. The girl freaks out and says that asking him to deal with a commoner is too much. The vampire stares at her with a serious look and asks if this is something trivial. With a somber aura, he says that for him, there is no such thing as boring or tedious work. The Marquis and his daughter are completely terrified by his presence. Vlad says he has grown tired of his work and the murders he has committed for it. The nobleman thanks the vampire for his help throughout all these long and difficult years. The divine being agrees and takes a step forward, preparing to leave. Vlad grabs the nobleman's head and complains about his power being used to clean up trash. He releases him and the Marquis falls to the ground while the vampire wipes his hand. Then the divine being leaps out the window in search of a real confrontation. He wants a battlefield with strong warriors worthy of his great power. With a wicked grin, he says that this will be a feast of awakening. Then the vampire transforms into bats and flies through the dark night. The nobleman observes from the window and remarks that his power is unparalleled. He tells his daughter that one day she will command the vampire, and the girl trembles. The father tries to calm her down, saying that he was also scared, but he is on their side. Suddenly, a new person appears in the room and surprises the two nobles. The man in the white hat recognizes him as the God Slayer and is startled. The newcomer tells the Marquis not to be afraid, because he has done a good job. The nobleman is confused and doesn't understand what the man in white means. The visitor recalls that he promised to eliminate his enemies for information. The Marquis says he still has no information about the whereabouts of the reincarnated being. The man says Alice is the bait, and his daughter lured her into his plan. With a smile, he says that the nobleman is lucky to receive the reward without effort. Then 3 shadows with red eyes appear behind the God's lair. The man asks if the nobleman knows why they are called God Slayers. He presents himself as one of the 3 supreme sages and reveals his shadows. The sage says that they are the strongest and need to stop the reincarnators. With his aura ablaze, he says they can win even at maximum level. The Marquis and his daughter are shocked by the revelation and the man's power. The wise man remembers the young woman and her desire for revenge against him. He reveals himself to be the matriarch of the 3 sages and says that the young woman is the perfect bait. The scene changes to a sky with 2 planets and colorful clouds on the horizon. We are back in Izana's great hall with a banquet table set. Our hero eats happily and says the food is very delicious. The apprentice explains that her tribe uses many spices in their dishes. She asks if the master liked it, and he says the taste reminds him of the curry from his world. The boy says the dish has a nostalgic taste of home, cooked food. With a smile, he compliments her and says that her curry is especially delicious. The young woman is happy and her face flushes at her master's praise. He then thanks her for the meal, and the apprentice continues to smile at him. The servant asks how her new colleague's training is progressing. While eating, she says that the training is going well and the young woman is very talented. The scene then cuts back to show the girl's intense training. The seraphim explains that she can strengthen her status through physical training and martial arts. She then takes her to a special dungeon to train until she is ready. The training begins with a 15-kilometer run with weights in the arms. Next are abdominal crunches and squats with very heavy weights. The servant reveals that there will be 200 series, and the boy is completely shocked. She says that with healing magic there will be no problems, and she cures the young woman. The process involves destroying the muscles and using magic to regenerate them. Back to the present, she says that 200 series is the limit for a human. The apprentice, however, says she can handle 200 series without problems. The boy then asks about the practical training she mentioned. The servant then attacks the young woman by surprise to begin practical training. With a swift blow, the seraphim throws the apprentice to the ground with great force. Our hero is startled by the throwing and finishing techniques. He asks if there will be 200 series, and she says that there are actually 600. The apprentice notices the master's concern, but says that everything is fine. With determination, she says she wants to become stronger and will overcome everything. The boy understands and asks her not to overdo the heavy training. He remarks that he didn't know the maid was such a physically demanding person. With a somber look, she says that pagan deities must be overthrown. The master and the apprentice are startled, and he quickly changes the subject. He asks if the school has scrolls 2 and 3 for her to pick up. The girl confirms the second one, but says the third one is a secret. Our hero becomes thoughtful and wonders what they should do now. The young woman says she is curious about something, and the servant asks what is troubling her. She then asks if the other maids don't eat, and Gabriel says they are beasts. The seraphim says she receives magic and doesn't need food, but the young woman sees her eating. She explains that hunger and mana supply are different things for beasts. With this, The girl understands that they eat for pleasure, and her master agrees. Then, the apprentice asks about the guardian, who stands at the entrance to the castle. Boy explains that the black dog prefers solitude and asks to keep watch. That guardian is perfect for the job because of his searching skills. The young woman is confused, and he explains that it is the power to find lost things. The black dog has the hunter's eye and senses everything within 50 kilometers. The girl wonders if the guardian also feels hunger, and her master ponders this. With this, he asks the servants if they have ever brought food to the black dog. The two maids are confused and don't know what to answer the master. Seeing the scene, the apprentice realizes that no one had ever thought about that subject. The young woman offers to take him a bento box, but the young man is worried about her. But the girl says she can't leave someone hungry alone and insists on going. Seeing her attitude, the hero watches her leave and calls her a good girl with a smile. Suddenly, someone in fluffy slippers appears at the door of the great hall. Our hero is surprised to see the figure and says that she has finally woken up. A young girl with a plush rabbit appears and calls herself Tsukuyomi, 6th level. With a sweet smile, she greets the boy with a good morning and calls him by his name.